Miguel had trimmed our hedges for 11 years. He told me later he had never seen anything like it. A small face behind the third-floor window, pale, still, watching him through glass that had not been opened in 3 years. "Mr. Calloway," he said into the phone, his voice barely holding together. "That window up top. Someone is looking at me. Someone small." My daughter-in-law Allison had sworn that room was sealed off. Water damage from the nor'easter. Structural risk, too dangerous to enter. But water damage does not press its hands against glass. Structural risk does not stare at you with the eyes of a child. And a room that has been closed for 3.5 years does not fog the window from the inside with warm breath on a cold October morning. I am deeply grateful you are here with me right now. Before we continue, I need to ask you something. Have you ever trusted someone so completely that you stopped looking at what was right above you? Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. It helps me know I am not telling this story into the dark. One important note: parts of this narrative have been adjusted for clarity and emotional impact. Any similarities to actual individuals or locations are coincidental, but the lessons here are worth every second of your time. That Thursday morning had started the way every Thursday started since I retired. Quiet. The particular silence of a house that remembers being full and has not forgiven you for letting it empty. I stood in the kitchen of our home on Atlantic Road in Gloucester, Massachusetts. The same kitchen where Catherine used to brew Earl Grey at exactly 6:15 every morning and read poetry out loud to no one because she said the walls deserved good literature. The same kitchen where my granddaughter Grace once sat cross-legged on the counter, watching me clean a brass compass and asking why the needle always pointed the same direction even when you spun it around. That was 3.5 years ago. Grace was 8 then, full of questions that arrived faster than I could answer them, full of a laugh that rang through this house like a bell buoy in calm harbor. Now she was supposedly in Providence at Whitfield Academy, a gifted boarding school that Allison had researched and selected and enrolled her in without much input from anyone else. Video calls every Sunday, progress reports every quarter, photographs of recitals, and science projects. Everything perfectly curated, everything precisely on schedule. I poured my coffee, dark roast from the place on Main Street that Catherine and I used to walk to before the chemo stole her legs. The clock read 8:41. Allison had left at 7:30 for Pilates, the same appointment she kept every Tuesday and Thursday without deviation. Miguel had arrived at 8 to trim the boxwoods. Routine, reliable, ordinary. My phone shattered that ordinary at 8:53. Miguel never called during a job. In 11 years, he communicated only through texts. A phone call meant the ground had shifted. "Mr. Calloway." His voice was low, wrapped around something he could not hold much longer. "That window up top. The one your daughter-in-law told me never to touch. She said water damage. Mold. But there is someone behind that glass. A face. A child's face. Looking right at me. Then it was gone. Like someone pulled them back. The kitchen tilted beneath me. I am a lighthouse keeper. I spent 35 years reading signals in fog, learning to feel the atmosphere shift before instruments confirmed it. Air pressure drops a fraction before a storm. The sea changes color an hour before the wind turns. Standing in that kitchen, everything around me changed color. "That room has been sealed for 3.5 years, I said. Allison said the nor'easter cracked the wall. Black mold. Dangerous. Mr. Calloway." I heard the ocean behind him. "Mold does not have a face. Water damage does not breathe on glass. Stay where you are." I am coming outside. But I did not go outside. I walked to the center of the kitchen and placed both palms flat against the ceiling. The plaster was cool under my hands. I closed my eyes and pressed harder, the way I used to press against the lighthouse walls during a gale to feel whether the structure was holding. And I felt something. A vibration. Faint, rhythmic, not plumbing, not wind. Something alive, Something small. Something directly above my kitchen, where I had made coffee every morning for 3.5 years. The front door opened. Allison's voice carried that particular warmth she always wore like perfume. "Dad, I forgot my water bottle. Is Miguel still out front?" I pulled my hands from the ceiling and smiled the way I had smiled at her every day for 6 years. "He is out there now. I think he mentioned something odd near the top of the house. Maybe a bird in the eaves." Something behind her eyes recalculated. A rapid sorting of possibilities. The way a wrecker on a dark shore adjusts the false light when a ship changes course. "Oh, that is probably the Osprey again." She said it smoothly. The way a person says something, rehearsed, without knowing they rehearsed it. "It built a nest last spring. I will handle it today," she called toward the door. "Miguel, do not worry about the top floor this season. I will have a specialist handle that area." Then she was gone. Heels clicking, door closing, engine starting, gravel shifting. I stood alone in the kitchen, heart hammering like a signal lamp cycling its pattern. Ospreys build nests on gables. True. Ospreys make noise near windows. Possible. But ospreys do not have small, pale faces. Ospreys do not press children's hands against glass. And ospreys do not leave warm breath on cold panes. Whatever was living above my kitchen was not a bird. It was a child. And the only child connected to this house, the only child connected to Allison, was my granddaughter Grace. The same Grace who was supposedly 3 hours away in Providence, studying, growing, thriving. But thriving children do not appear behind sealed windows at 8:50 in the morning. And the vibration I felt through that ceiling was not water damage. It was not mold. It was not an osprey. It was a heartbeat, small and fast and terrified. It had been beating above my kitchen for 3.5 years while I drank my coffee and trusted the silence I should have questioned. The fog had been thick, but the signal was there all along. I just had not been looking up. That night I did not sleep. I lay in the bedroom Catherine and I had shared for 31 years, staring at the ceiling, the way a man stares at something he no longer trusts. The house settled around me, creaking, breathing, holding its secrets behind plaster and timber and decades of paint. Catherine used to say this house had a voice. She said it the first time we walked through the front door in 1989. Me 30, still smelling like salt and diesel from the lighthouse. Her 28, already reading the rooms the way she read everything. Carefully, completely, missing nothing. She ran her fingers along the banister and said, "This house has been waiting for someone to listen to it. We built our life here the way the tide builds a shoreline. Slowly, each day adding something." I replaced the porch boards with white oak I milled from a tree that fell during the nor'easter of '91. Catherine filled the living room shelves with novels and poetry and a ceramic lighthouse her mother brought from Cornwall. I rebuilt the kitchen cabinets from salvaged ship timber because Catherine said she wanted to cook surrounded by things that had survived the sea. She filled them with loose leaf tea and cinnamon and jars of honey from the farm stand on Essex Avenue. And Catherine built the 3rd floor. Not with her hands, but with her heart. The room had been an empty attic when we bought the house. Sloped ceiling, one east-facing window, bare floorboards. She saw a library. Over 3 years, she carried 400 books up 2 flights of stairs. Poetry, novels, history, children's literature, a Spanish-English dictionary. She used tutoring immigrant families at the public library. She placed an armchair by the window, a floor lamp with a green glass shade, a small table for her teacup. She called it her lighthouse. She said every keeper needs a room at the top where the light lives, and mine is full of words instead of wicks. When Grace was born, Catherine added a reading nook in the corner, a cushion, a low shelf with picture books, a small quilt sewn from fabric scraps. Every weekend Grace spent with us, Catherine carried her up those stairs and read to her. I could hear them through the floor while I made breakfast. Catherine's voice rising and falling, Grace interrupting every third sentence. Grandma, why did the whale eat him? Grandma, is the ocean really that deep? Grandma, can lighthouses talk to each other? Catherine always answered. She never said, I do not know. She said, let us find out, and they would search together. That was how Catherine loved. She gave her attention the way a lighthouse gives its light, completely, without reservation, turning toward whatever darkness needed it most. Take care of our family, Edmund. She said those words the last week. Hospice bed in our living room. December. Her hand in mine felt like paper folded too many times. All of them. Promise me. I promised the way husbands promise dying wives. With everything I had. She passed on a Wednesday. Robert flew in from Boston. Allison handled the arrangements. Efficient, composed, compassionate, at precisely the right moments. 6 months later, Allison moved in. She said living alone was not healthy for me. She said Grace would benefit from time with her grandfather. For a while it was good. Grace running through the kitchen. Grandpa, why does the compass always point north? Grandpa, tell me the whale story again. The whale. Catherine's story. A humpback lost in Gloucester Harbor that found its way back to open sea by following the foghorn. Grace asked for it every night. Every night I told it, sitting on the edge of her bed in the third-floor reading room. My granddaughter falling asleep holding a stuffed bear Catherine gave her on her 5th birthday. The last birthday Catherine was alive for. Then one evening, 14 months after Catherine passed, Allison sat me down at the kitchen table. Hands folded the way people fold them when they have rehearsed what comes next. Dad, I found an incredible opportunity. Whitfield Academy in Providence. Top gifted program in New England. 25 students per year. Grace tested in the 99th percentile. I did not know Grace had been tested. Allison smiled. I wanted to surprise everyone. Robert is thrilled. Providence is 3 hours away. They have video calls every week. It will be like she never left. I wanted to argue. But Allison had brochures, testimonials, answers, before I formed questions. And Robert agreed. My son, who trusted his wife, the way I once trusted his mother, completely. Without pause. So Grace left. Or that is what I believed. Allison drove her to Providence on a Sunday in March. I stood on the porch watching, Grace's face pressed against the rear window, her hand flat on the glass, her mouth forming words the glass swallowed. I waved until the car disappeared behind the hedge. 3.5 years. 1,277 days. 455 mornings. Making coffee alone in a kitchen that used to echo with her questions. I spoke to her every Sunday on video, her face on a screen, smiling, talking about friends and projects. But I never touched her hand, never smelled her shampoo, never felt her arms around my neck. 3.5 years of loving my granddaughter through glass and pixels because Allison said it was real, because Catherine's voice in my memory kept saying family means trust. But lying in that bed, palms still tingling from what I felt through the ceiling, I understood something terrible. Trust is not a compass. It does not always point toward truth. Sometimes it points wherever the strongest magnet pulls it. And I had been following a false bearing for 3.5 years. Catherine would have seen it. She would have looked at Allison and known the way she read every person she ever met. Carefully, completely, missing nothing. But Catherine was gone, and I was just a lighthouse keeper. Good at watching the horizon, terrible at seeing what was happening inside my own house. Tomorrow I would stop trusting the fog and start reading the signals. Because that is what keepers do. We watch. We record. We do not leave the light unattended. And the light above my kitchen had been dark for far too long. At 1:52 in the morning I heard it. The soft click of Allison's bedroom door. Footsteps in the hallway. Not toward the bathroom. Not toward the kitchen. toward the narrow staircase at the back of the house, the one that leads to the third floor, the one that leads to Catherine's library, the one no one has any reason to climb at this hour, unless they are carrying something to someone who cannot come down. I did not follow her. Not that night. I lay still and listened, the way I used to listen to the sea during a night watch. Footsteps, climbing. A pause, at the top. The faint electronic sound of buttons being pressed. A door opening. Silence for 23 minutes. Then the door again. Buttons. Footsteps descending. Her bedroom clicking shut. At 2:15. 23 minutes. I counted every one. Friday morning I woke before dawn. In 35 years of lighthouse keeping, I had learned that the body knows what to do when the mind is drowning. You reach for the logbook. You record what you observed. Time, weather, visibility, anomalies. You write it down because writing makes the invisible visible and the unthinkable measurable. I pulled a leather notebook from the nightstand. Catherine gave it to me on our 25th anniversary. Nautical charts embossed on the cover. Graph paper inside. I opened to a blank page, wrote the date, and listed every detail. Miguel's call, the face in the window, the vibration through the ceiling, Allison's explanation, the footsteps at 1:52, 23 minutes, on the third floor. This was my logbook now, and the anomaly I was tracking was not a ship off course. It was something far worse. Allison left at 7:45 for yoga. I watched her car disappear before I moved. I retrieved a flashlight from the garage and climbed the stairs. The first to second floor staircase was original. 1892 construction. Douglas fir treads I had refinished twice. I knew every voice they made. Third step, popped on the left. Seventh whispered on both sides. 12th was silent no matter where you stepped. The second to third floor staircase was narrower. Built for servants expected to move without being heard. I had climbed these stairs 10,000 times. To Catherine's library. To read with grace. To tighten a floorboard or replace a latch. I knew them the way a pianist knows keys. At the top, a small landing. And the door. I stopped breathing. The original had been white oak. I hung it myself in 1993. The year Catherine claimed the attic as her library. 6-panel, brass hinges, a simple privacy lock you could open with a coin. That door was gone. In its place stood something that did not belong in a house. Steel core, industrial gray. A deadbolt mounted on the outside. An electronic keypad beside the handle. A red light glowing like an ember. This was not a door designed to keep weather out. This was a door designed to keep someone in. I ran my fingers along the frame. Fresh caulk where steel met wood. The original casing had been cut to fit the wider frame. Rough saw marks, hurried, disrespectful of the material. Phillips head screws. Bright chrome. Every other screw in this house was flathead brass, original hardware I had maintained for decades. Someone installed this door quickly, cheaply, without my knowledge. I pressed my ear against the steel. Cold metal on skin. 30 seconds of listening. Nothing. But it was the wrong kind of silence. Not empty. Held. The silence of something alive choosing not to make a sound. I went back down to the kitchen and opened the trash bin. Normal waste. Coffee grounds. Vegetable scraps. Then, outside to the larger bins. In the recycling, tucked beneath a flattened box, a white CVS bag tied shut. I untied it. 3 empty cartons of Horizon organic whole milk. The kind with the cow on the front. The kind Catherine bought for Grace because growing bones needed real milk. A crushed Cheerios box, the kind with smaller pieces for young fingers. And a bottle of Flintstones. Complete multivitamins. Chewable. Ages 4 through 12. I set each item on the driveway like evidence at a harbor inspection. Hands steady. Still recording. Still measuring. Inside, I checked the pantry. No children's milk. No Cheerios. No vitamins. These items had been purchased, consumed, and discarded without touching our shared kitchen. A parallel supply chain running through my house without my knowledge. I opened the shared Target account on my phone. Allison's card. Last Wednesday. $163. Horizon milk. 2 cartons. Cheerios. 2 boxes. Vitamins. Crayons. 64-pack. Drawing paper. 200 sheets. Children's underwear. 6-pack. Size small. I stared at that last line. Size small. For a child approximately 8 to 11. Grace would be 11 now. I scrolled further. The pattern repeated every week. Milk, cereal, vitamins, crayons, paper, small clothing. Sometimes a puzzle. Sometimes a children's paperback. Small purchases blending into household noise. Invisible unless you searched. I had never searched. 2 weeks ago, between the cereal and the crayons, one line stopped me cold. Children's winter coat. Size 10. $47. Grace would fit a size 10. But Grace was supposedly in a heated dormitory at Whitfield Academy. Boarding students do not need their mothers buying winter coats from a Target in Gloucester. Unless the child was not in Providence. Unless she was somewhere much closer. Somewhere with a steel door and a keypad and a red light in the dark. Somewhere the heating duct had been sealed along with everything else. And a winter coat meant the room was cold. I closed the phone, opened the logbook, and recorded every item, every price, every date. The way a keeper logs a vessel that should not be in these waters. The fog was lifting, and what it revealed was worse than any wreck I had ever seen from the lighthouse gallery. Friday morning, I sat in my old Ford parked in the driveway with the engine off and both hands on the steering wheel. The truck smelled like sea air and old leather. I needed that smell. Something familiar, something anchored, because what I was about to do would either confirm the worst suspicion of my life or prove I was a paranoid old man losing his grip. I searched Whitfield Academy, Providence, Rhode Island. The website appeared immediately. Navy and silver. Children in blazers. A mission statement about cultivating exceptional young minds. It looked real, professional, exactly the kind of school a caring mother would choose. I dialed the main office. 2 rings. Whitfield Academy. This is Sandra. How may I help you? Good morning. My name is Edmund Calloway. I am calling about my granddaughter Grace Calloway. She has been enrolled approximately 3.5 years. I wanted to check her attendance record. Typing. Let me check our system, sir. Spell the last name. C-A-L-L-O-W-A-Y. First name Grace. 11 years old. 5th grade. More typing. A longer pause. Sir, I am not showing any student by that name. Let me check historical records. Another pause. No, sir. I have searched back 6 years. We have never had a student named Grace Calloway. Are you certain you have the correct school? The truck cab shrank around me. The way the lighthouse watchroom felt during the worst storms when the walls pressed inward and the only thing between you and the sea was glass and faith. I am certain. Could you check one more time? Sir. I have tried every variation. Calloway, Calloway, Calloway. No match. I am sorry. I called 2 more schools. Lincoln Academy in Warwick. Wheeler School in Providence. Names Allison mentioned over the years. Oh, Grace's friend goes to Lincoln. Wheeler was our second choice. Neither had ever enrolled a Grace Calloway. In 35 years of keeping the light, I learned the most dangerous signal is the one designed to look exactly like the truth. In the old days, wreckers stood on dark shores holding lanterns at angles, meant to mimic lighthouse beams. Ships mistook those lights for safe harbor, adjusted course, and ran onto rocks. The wreckers picked through the wreckage. It was not random cruelty. It was architecture. A system built to exploit trust. The only defense was knowing that not every light on the shore tells the truth. Allison was a wrecker. I had been sailing toward her light for 3.5 years. I opened my photos. Every month, Allison sent pictures to our family chat. Grace, at a recital. Grace, at a science fair. Grace, with friends, in a cafeteria. I selected the most recent. Grace standing before a brick building with a Navy banner reading Academic Achievement Day. I navigated to reverse image search. Uploaded the photo. Results in 4 seconds. The brick building was not Whitfield Academy. It was a stock photograph on 3 websites. Royalty-free. $8 to download. The banner digitally edited. The original showed a different school in a different state. I checked a second photo. Grace at a science fair. The gymnasium. Poster displays. Fluorescent lighting. All stock. All from the same website. All edited to suggest Whitfield. My hands finally shook. Not from cold. From understanding settling onto my shoulders like wet concrete. I opened the most recent report card Allison forwarded to Robert. Grace Calloway, 5th grade. Whitfield Academy. Straight A marks. Teacher comments. Praising creativity. I zoomed in. The logo was pixelated. The font was Times New Roman. Whitfield's actual website used Garamond with crisp vector artwork. The report card was a fabrication created on a laptop, printed, photographed, sent to a father who never thought to verify it because the woman who sent it was his wife. 3.5 years of photographs purchased online. 3.5 years of report cards designed on a computer. 3.5 years of a school that never heard my granddaughter's name. Grace never went to Providence. Never sat in a classroom. Never made friends whose names I could not remember because they did not exist. That evening I opened the shared drive where Allison saved Sunday video call recordings. I played the most recent. Grace's face filled the screen. Brown hair, brown eyes, a smile that looked like hers. Hi, Grandpa. How are you? Did you finish that compass you were working on? I played it again. This time I watched the eyes. They blinked. But the blinks came a fraction after each sentence ended. Not before. Not during. After. Every time. Like a programmed response, rather than an involuntary reflex. I downloaded a detection application called Sensity. Uploaded 30 seconds. The analysis took 40 seconds. Red text appeared. High probability of synthetic media. Confidence level 94%. Facial mapping inconsistencies detected in orbital region and jaw articulation. I closed the laptop. The kitchen was dark. Above me through the ceiling, a real girl breathed. A girl whose face had been stolen and stretched across a digital mask. A girl whose father smiled at that mask every Sunday and said "Good night, sweetheart," without knowing his daughter was close enough to hear his voice through the floor. The wrecker's light had been burning for 3.5 years. Every signal it sent was false. Every single one. Saturday morning, my phone buzzed at 7:20. Dorothy Yates. Catherine's closest friend for 28 years. The woman who sat beside me at the funeral and brought clam chowder every Sunday for 4 months because she said grief should never go hungry. Who managed numbers the way I managed lighthouses. With precision. With respect. With an understanding that if one figure is wrong, the whole ledger slides into the water. Dorothy never called early. Coffee at 7:30. Emails at 8. Clients at 9. A 7:20 call meant something could not wait. Edmund. Her voice was tight, controlled. Can you meet me today? Not at your house. Somewhere private. Brood Awakenings on Main Street. I can be there by 8:30. The drive took 12 minutes. The morning was sharp for October. Low 50s. Salt air, carrying the first cold edge of the season. The kind of weather that reminds you the ocean does not care about your plans. It turns when it turns. The cafe was half full. I took a table in the back beneath a framed photograph of 10-Pound Island Lighthouse from 1942. Catherine would have studied it. She would have said a lighthouse is not a building. It is a promise. Dorothy arrived at 8:43 carrying a leather briefcase and wearing the expression of a woman who had not slept. She sat without ordering. "Edmund, how much do you know about Grace's education fund?" I knew the basics. Catherine started it when Grace was born. Life insurance, savings, every birthday check, every holiday bonus, all funneled into a trust for Grace's future. 2.1 million. Catherine told me before she passed. Said it would cover college, graduate school, a home, whatever Grace needed. Dorothy opened the briefcase and pulled out a thick manila folder. Catherine asked me to serve as secondary trustee. Robert was primary. Everything was fine for the first 2 years. She spread papers across the table. Bank statements highlighted in yellow and red, like navigational markers. 8 months ago, Allison requested a transfer of management authority. Told Robert the fund needed a higher yield account. Robert signed because Allison asked. Because he trusts her. Her voice hardened on those last words. Once she had sole access, the withdrawals started. She slid a spreadsheet toward me. Numbers marching down the page. May, 60,000. June, 90,000. July, 120,000. Month after month. Relentless. Accelerating. A tide pulling everything out to sea. 1.6 million. Gone in 14 months. Only 500,000 remains. And I froze it last week. The cafe dissolved around me. Where did it go? Dorothy pulled out a forensic accounting report. 3 crypto margin trading platforms. Coinbase Pro, Kraken, and a private leverage site registered in the Cayman Islands. Plus, a poker site in Curaçao. She lost 1.1 million in 14 months. The amounts increase every month. Last month alone, 170,000 in a single week on a leveraged position that collapsed overnight. I sat back, felt every vertebra against the chair. There is more. She pulled out a property document. A second mortgage on your house. 3 months ago. Forged your signature. $280,000. Already gone. Same platforms. She mortgaged my house. Your house, Edmund. She forged your name. The signature does not match. The E leans wrong. The D is too narrow. A handwriting expert could confirm it in 15 minutes. A lighthouse keeper notices these things. We sign logbooks every watch. We know our own hand. Dorothy closed the folder. Catherine saved every penny for 20 years. Drove that old Volvo to 200,000 miles. Packed lunch every day to put an extra 20 into that fund each week. So Grace would never struggle. So Grace would have choices. I know. Allison burned through it in 14 months. And she needed nobody asking questions about where Grace actually was. If anyone called that school, if anyone demanded to visit, everything collapses. The fund, the gambling, the forgery, I understood then. Not just what Allison had done, but why. Grace was not locked on the 3rd floor because Allison was cruel. Not only that, Grace was the evidence. A living receipt proving the money never went to education. An 11-year-old whose existence in Providence had to remain fiction because the moment anyone confirmed she was not there, every forged signature, every false signal would crash like a ship meeting rocks. My granddaughter was not just a prisoner. She was a secret. The kind that costs $1.6 million to keep. Dorothy gripped my wrist. What are you going to do? I am going to get my granddaughter out of that room. And I am going to make sure every dollar is accounted for. She pushed the folder across the table. Everything documented. Dates, amounts, platform records, the forged mortgage. Keep it safe. Not in the house. I took it. Paper and ink. Almost weightless. but it held 20 years of Catherine's sacrifice. Packed lunches, an old Volvo, extra 20s tucked into an account meant to give a little girl the world. All reduced to numbers on a screen. Catherine saved for 20 years. Allison destroyed it in 14 months. And she needed my granddaughter sealed behind a steel door to make sure nobody discovered where the light had gone. Sunday afternoon, I was cleaning a brass sextant in the garage. Not because it needed cleaning, but because my hands needed occupation while my mind worked through 4 days of evidence. The receipts, the phone calls, Dorothy's folder locked in the truck toolbox. Evidence stacking like cargo before a long voyage. Every piece weighed, measured, placed where it would hold steady in rough water. The knock came at the side door. 3 solid raps, not Allison's rhythm. She knocked quick and light. This was knuckles against wood. Heavy, deliberate. The knock of a man who had been deciding whether to come for a long time. Tom Corrigan stood holding an iPad against his chest. His face was gray. Not sick. Troubled. The gray of someone carrying something alone for too long. Tom had lived next door 12 years. 69. Retired Gloucester Fire Department after 34 years. Solid. Quiet. Not the kind to show up on a Sunday looking like the ground had shifted beneath him. Edmund. Can I come in? There is something you need to see. At the workbench, he placed both hands flat on the surface, the way a man steadies himself before stepping onto a rough boat. My security camera covers my driveway and part of yours. Specifically the side where your exterior staircase goes up to the 3rd floor. I have had it 2 years. Never thought much about your side until 8 months ago when I noticed a pattern. Night vision. Green-gray image. The exterior staircase. 14 steps to the 3rd floor landing and the steel door. Last Tuesday. 1:47 in the morning. He pressed play. Allison appeared at the bottom. Carried a tray covered with cloth. Climbed quickly. The way someone climbs stairs, they have climbed hundreds of times in darkness. Paused at the top. Keypad glow. Door opened. She slipped inside. Door closed. Tom fast-forwarded 24 minutes. Door opened. Allison emerged carrying a small tied plastic bag. Waste. She descended and disappeared. Every night, Edmund. Sometimes twice. 8 months straight. Always between midnight and 3. Always carrying something up. Food. Supplies. Coming down with waste bags, sometimes laundry in a pillowcase. He swiped through video after video. Different dates, same pattern. The precision struck me like a swell you did not see coming. This was not erratic. This was a schedule. Maintained for months. Tom paused. His finger hovered over one file. Pain behind his eyes. March 15th. 2:20 in the morning. Grace's birthday. She would have turned 11. He pressed play. Allison carried something different. A small plate with cupcakes. 3. On top, the faint glow of candles. She climbed carefully, one hand balancing, the other on the rail. Protecting the flames from the ocean breeze the way you protect a lantern in a gale. At the top, she entered the code. The candlelight flickered and vanished inside. She baked cupcakes, I said. My voice came from somewhere behind the ribs. At 2 in the morning, carried them up with candles lit. 3 birthdays. I whispered. She turned 9, 10, and 11 up there. Tom exhaled. One more. September 22nd. 3:12 in the morning. He pressed play. Stairs empty, but the 3rd floor window was visible. 8 seconds of nothing. Then, movement behind the glass. Quick, small. A child's silhouette. 2 hands flat against the window. A face close to the glass, looking out at the ocean, at the world. Then gone. 4 seconds. As if pulled back. As if the child knew she was not supposed to be seen. I gripped the workbench. Knuckles white against wood. I saw that live, Tom said. 3 in the morning on my phone. Almost called you. Almost called police. Told myself it was a curtain. I wanted it to be nothing, because the alternative was something I could not carry. Why now? Thursday, your kitchen light stayed on until 3. Friday, you sat in your truck 40 minutes, staring at nothing. I recognized the look. Men standing outside houses about to burn. You were already looking. He placed a USB drive on the workbench. 187 files. Time-stamped. Organized by week. I picked it up. Lighter than a brass fitting but holding 8 months of darkness. 3 birthday cupcakes. 1 silhouette pressing hands against glass. I should have come months ago, Tom said. I failed you. I failed that girl. You are here now. That matters. He nodded. Then opened one final file. Last Thursday, 2:38 in the morning. Allison climbed the stairs carrying no tray, no food. Only a small white bag with a green cross logo. A pharmacy bag. She moved faster than usual. Code entered. Door opened. 11 minutes inside. She emerged with the bag folded flat under her arm. Empty. Every Thursday and Sunday for 3 months, Tom said. Same bag. Same logo. I stared at the frozen frame. No prescription would be written for a child who does not exist in any medical record. Whatever Allison carried through that door was not medicine prescribed by someone who had examined my granddaughter. It was something she obtained alone, something meant to keep a small girl quiet in a room where silence was the only rule that kept the walls from closing in. Monday night, the house was dark, except for my laptop screen. Allison had gone to bed at 10:20. I waited 30 minutes, then opened the family videos folder on the shared drive. 3.5 years of Sunday calls, neatly organized. Allison always recorded them. For memories, she said. So Grace can look back and see how much we loved her. At the time, it seemed thoughtful. Now it looked like evidence she never expected anyone to examine. I opened the most recent call. 3 weeks ago. A girl's face filled the screen. Brown hair, brown eyes. A smile that looked like Grace's. Hi, Grandpa. Did you read that book I told you about? She remembered the book from 2 calls earlier. That seemed real. But I was no longer watching like a grandfather. I was reading a signal through fog, looking for the flash that comes a half-second late, the rhythm that does not match the chart. I played it again, watching only the eyes. They blinked. But the blink arrived a fraction after each sentence. Not before, not during, after. Every time. A light triggered by timer rather than the involuntary reflex of a living child. I opened a call from 6 months ago. Same. 1 year. Same. 2 years. Same. Then I opened a real video from before Providence. Grace, turning 8. Blowing out candles while Catherine held the camera. In that video, Grace blinked constantly. Mid-sentence. Mid-laugh. Random. Natural. Human. The frequency on the Sunday calls was wrong. The background in every call was identical. Beige wall, bookshelf left, window with cream curtains right. Lighting never shifted. No shadow changed as afternoon became evening. I zoomed into the bookshelf. Spines blurred. Not camera blur, render blur. No titles. No texture. Colored rectangles, meant to suggest books without being books. A signal, designed to look real but built from nothing. 3.5 years of smiling at a screen, saying I love you, sweetheart. 3.5 years of Robert calling weekly, asking about homework and friends. None of it real. The face generated. The voice synthesized. The background fabricated. Software wearing my granddaughter's face like a mask, speaking in a voice built from recordings Allison made before the door locked shut. 11:47. I called Robert. 3rd ring. Hey, Dad. Everything okay? When was the last time you saw Grace in person? Not a screen. In person. Silence. 5 seconds. Dad. What is this about? Just answer me. I guess 3.5 years ago. When Allison drove her to Providence, I was going to visit at Thanksgiving, but Allison said the school discouraged first semester visits. Then winter policy. Then shifts got in the way, and Allison always said next month, and His voice disappeared. When was your next planned visit? This Christmas. Allison said the school relaxed their policy. I booked a flight December 23rd. 7 weeks. Enough time for another layer of deception. A fake visit to a fake school. Robert, I need you to trust me. Something is wrong. I cannot explain tonight, but do not say anything to Allison. Do not change routine. Can you do that? Dad, you are scaring me. I know. Trust me the way you trusted your mother. Quietly. Okay, Dad. I ended the call. Then dialed Detective Karen Shaw. Dorothy gave me her card that morning. Special Victims Unit. 18 years. She answered on the second ring. Detective Shaw. This is Edmund Calloway. Dorothy Yates gave me your name. I have evidence of a child held against her will in my home. Financial fraud. Forged documents. Fabricated video requiring forensic analysis. Tell me everything, Mr. Calloway. I did. Every signal. The face in the window. The steel door. Receipts. The school that never existed. Deepfake calls. Dorothy's financial records. Tom's surveillance footage. The pharmacy bags. Shaw listened without interrupting. Then she said, Wednesday, 7 a.m. Warrant. Signed by then. Do not approach that door. Do not confront her. One more thing, Mr. Calloway. Is there any chance the child could be in immediate danger tonight? I looked up at the ceiling, pressed my palm against the plaster, and I heard it. Not a vibration. A breath. Faint. Rhythmic. The frequency of a small chest rising and falling in sleep. My granddaughter breathing 12 feet above me through wood and plaster. And 3.5 years of silence. She is alive, I said. I can hear her breathing. Tuesday night. 11:30. The house was silent. The way a house is silent when it knows something is about to change. Not the settling silence of old timber and plaster cooling after a warm day. A different silence. The held breath of a structure waiting for what comes next. Allison's bedroom door had closed at 10:15. I gave her 75 minutes. Lay in the dark, counting each one the way I used to count, the seconds between lighthouse flashes during a calibration check. At 11:30 I rose. Did not turn on lights. Did not put on shoes. Barefoot on hardwood. The way a keeper moves through a structure, he knows by heart. Every board memorized. Every sound mapped. Through the kitchen. Past the counter where my coffee cup sat waiting for morning. Past the stove where Catherine's blue kettle still sat on the back burner because I had never been able to move it. Through the back door into the night air. October in Gloucester, 48 degrees. The sky was clear. Stars visible above the harbor. The beam from 10-Pound Island Lighthouse swept across the water in its ancient rhythm. 4 seconds on, 4 seconds dark. I had watched that light for 30 years from this yard. It had never once failed to come back around. The exterior staircase rose along the east side of the house. 14 steps. Original to the 1892 construction. I had replaced the treads twice. White oak, treated for coastal weather. I knew them the way a musician knows strings. First step silent on both sides. Fourth step groaned on the left near the railing. Eighth step popped in the center no matter how carefully you placed your weight. 11th step was the loudest. A deep creak that traveled through the frame and into the wall. I took them on the right side. Slowly. Shifting weight to the outer edge, where the boards were strongest and quietest. 4th step. Barely a whisper. 8th step. I pressed close to the railing, and it gave me nothing. 11th step. I spread my weight across 2 treads simultaneously and moved through it like smoke. The landing. The door. In the dark, it was worse than daylight. I could feel its wrongness without seeing it. The mass of it. The industrial cold radiating from its surface. This was not wood. This was not a door that belonged 12 feet above a kitchen where a grandmother once brewed Earl Grey and read Tennyson to the walls. This was steel. The kind of door you install in a warehouse or a storage facility. The kind meant to separate what is inside from everything outside. Permanently. A deadbolt mounted on the exterior. Beside the handle, the electronic keypad. Its red LED glowing like the navigation light on a vessel you cannot identify in the dark. Red means port side. Red means something is there but you cannot yet tell what it is or which direction it is heading. I had brought nothing to open it. No tools. No codes. I had not come to break in. Shaw had been clear. 7 a.m. Wednesday. Warrant signed. Officers present. Everything legal. Documented. Impossible for a defense attorney to dismantle. But I had not come to break in. I had come to listen. I placed my palm flat against the door. Cold metal beneath a thin layer of paint. I pressed my ear against it and held my breath. For 10 seconds, I heard nothing but my own blood moving through my skull. Then a sound so small, it could have been the house breathing. But it was not the house. It was a child. Breathing quick and shallow. The way a child breathes when they are awake in the dark and trying to be silent because they have learned that silence is safer than sound. That silence is the only protection they know. My throat closed. My eyes burned. But I kept my voice steady. Low. Barely above a whisper. Grace. It is Grandpa. I am here. The breathing stopped. Complete silence. 10 seconds that stretched past anything time should be able to hold. I pressed my hand harder against the steel, as if I could push through it, as if love alone could dissolve metal the way the sea dissolves stone. Given enough time, given enough pressure, given enough refusal, to stop. Then 3 knocks. Small. Light. From the other side. Not loud, not panicked. Deliberate. 1, 2, 3. The way a child knocks who has learned that noise brings consequences. Careful, controlled, but unmistakable. I knocked back. 3 times. Same rhythm. 1, 2, 3. I am here. I hear you. I know you are real. Silence again. But different now. Not the silence of fear. The silence of listening. Of a child holding still, because something impossible might be happening, and she does not want to scare it away. Grandpa. Her voice came through the steel like light through fog. Thin. Distant. But there. Is the outside safe now? My chest seized. Whatever lie. Allison told this child to keep her behind this door for 3.5 years, lived inside those 5 words. Is the outside safe now? She still believed it. Still believed the world beyond this room would hurt her. Still believed the door was protection rather than prison. The outside was always safe, sweetheart. There was never any danger. There was never any sickness. The ocean is the same ocean it always was. And tomorrow morning I am going to open this door and you are going to walk out of here and never come back. A long pause. I could hear her processing. 11 years old. 3.5 years. Sealed in a room, trying to weigh what her mother told her against what her grandfather was telling her now through 2 inches of steel at midnight. Mama said the ocean brought the sickness. She said sound carries it. She said if I talked loud it would come through the walls and find me and find you. There is no sickness, Grace. There never was. Your mama lied. The ocean is safe. The air is safe. Your voice cannot hurt anyone. Tomorrow morning people are coming to open this door. Police. Good people. I promise on Grandma Catherine's name. The longest silence yet. The beam from 10-Pound Island swept across the harbor, and for 1 second its light touched the landing where I knelt. Then darkness again. Then light. The rhythm it had kept for over 100 years. Okay, Grandpa. I will wait. 3.5 years. 1,277 days. And she said it so simply. I will wait. As if waiting was the only language she had been allowed to speak. As if patience was the single skill this room had taught her. I lowered myself to the landing floor. Sat with my back against the steel door. The cold seeped through my shirt. I did not care. I was not leaving this spot until morning. I was not leaving my granddaughter alone for one more night. Through the door I heard her settle. Small movements. A mattress shifting. The sound of a child curling around something soft. Then her breathing slowed and deepened. She was falling asleep. Knowing I was on the other side. Knowing morning was not a drawing on a wall anymore. It was a promise, with a name attached to it. I stayed. Counting her breaths the way a keeper counts the flashes. 100. 200. 300. Each one a confirmation that she was alive. Each one proof that morning was coming. The stars turned overhead. The lighthouse beam swept its circle. And at 5:47, the first gray light of dawn touched the water. Grace's voice came through the steel. Quiet. Almost not there. Grandpa. I can hear the ocean. I forgot what it sounded like. 7:12 Wednesday morning. 1 week exactly since Miguel's phone call shattered my ordinary Thursday. Golden light angled through the oak tree in the front yard and fell across the driveway in long stripes. I stood on the porch with coffee I had not tasted. My back ached from a night on wooden boards. My eyes burned from salt air and tears I had not let fall. But my hands were steady, the way a keeper's hands stay steady when the storm has passed and the work of mourning begins. 3 vehicles turned onto Atlantic Road. 2 unmarked sedans. 1 patrol car. No sirens. No lights. They arrived, the way the tide arrives. Quietly. Inevitably. With a force that does not need to announce itself. They pulled to the curb with the kind of precision that tells you the people inside have done this before and understand what waits on the other side of the next door they open. Detective Karen Shaw emerged from the lead car. Gray blazer, badge on belt, hair pulled back tight. Beside her, Officer Daniel Medina. Behind them, 2 more officers, and a woman in a dark windbreaker with forensics printed across the back in white letters that caught the morning light. Shaw walked up the driveway. Her eyes moved across the house the way mine move across a lighthouse during a structural inspection, reading the surface for what lives beneath it. Mr. Calloway, we have the warrant. Are you ready? I set the coffee on the porch railing. I have been ready since 2 in the morning. Where is she? Upstairs. Her bedroom is on the ground floor. Back hallway. Shaw turned to Medina. She does not go near that staircase. Medina nodded and moved toward the back of the house with 1 officer. Shaw looked at me. You do not have to be present for this, Mr. Calloway. I am going up those stairs, I said. I built the landing she is standing behind. My granddaughter is on the other side of that door. I am not waiting anywhere else. We entered through the front. Allison's voice came from the hallway. Confused first, then rising. Sharpening. What is happening? Dad! Why are there police in our house? What did you do? Medina stepped in front of her. Ma'am, we have a warrant to search this property. Please remain on this floor. I did not look at her. I walked past. Through the kitchen. Out the back door. To the staircase. Shaw and the forensics woman followed. We climbed. First step silent. 4th step groaned on the left. 8th step popped. 11th step I took on the outer edge out of habit. But it did not matter now. For the last time, these stairs carried someone upward with purpose beyond delivering food to a prisoner and collecting waste. The landing. The steel door. The keypad with its red LED. In daylight, the door looked worse than it had in darkness. Industrial. Institutional. The kind of door that belongs in a facility, not 14 steps above a kitchen where a grandmother once brewed tea and read poetry because she believed the walls deserved beautiful words. The forensics woman connected a small device to the keypad. Wires and a screen. 30 seconds of cycling through combinations. A beep. The LED turned green. The deadbolt clicked. Shaw stepped aside. She understood what this moment was. She had been doing this work for 18 years. And she understood that some doors belong to the people who built the house they stand in. I gripped the handle. Turned it. Pushed. The smell hit first. Disinfectant, stale air, lavender soap. The closed-in scent of a space lived in but never opened. Never touched by wind or rain, or the salt mist that reaches every other room in this house because the ocean is always there. Always breathing through the cracks the way the sea breathes through everything on this coast. But not this room. This room had been sealed against the world, and the world had gone on without it. The room was small, 10 by 12, a narrow bed against the left wall, white sheets, a thin blanket, a single flat pillow, a small table beside it, with a lamp and 4 books stacked neatly. Against the right wall, a child's desk, paper scattered across it, crayons, colored pencils, worn down to stubs, held together with rubber bands. And on the walls, every wall, covering every inch of plaster from the baseboard to as high as a child's arm could reach, drawings, hundreds of them, taped, pinned, layered over each other like the pages of a book that kept being written because the author could not stop. The ocean in every shade of blue a crayon box contains, waves and shoreline and rocks and sky, and lighthouses. Lighthouse after lighthouse after lighthouse. Tall ones, small ones. Lighthouses at dawn, at dusk, in storm, in calm. The beam always present, always sweeping, always reaching out across the water towards something beyond the edge of the paper. And doors. Open doors filled with golden light. Doors leading out of rooms into sunshine. Doors with a figure standing in them. Tall, broad-shouldered, white hair, one hand reaching forward, the other holding something round. A coffee cup. In the far corner of the bed, pressed where 2 walls met, sat a child. Small, thin, brown hair tangled past her shoulders. A faded blue shirt that was too big for her. Gray sweatpants with a hole in one knee. Arms wrapped around an old hardcover book clutched against her chest. I could read the spine even from the doorway. The Old Man and the Sea. Catherine's copy. The one she kept on the shelf beside the armchair. The one she read to Grace on the last weekend they spent together in this room before the door became steel and the books became a prison library and the window became the only proof that the world outside still existed. Her eyes found mine. Wide. Dark. Holding something older than fear. Something that looked like the last ember of a fire that refused to go out no matter how long the night lasted. She looked at the doorway. At the light pouring in from the hallway. At Shaw. At the forensics woman. Then at me. And I saw it. Through the thinness and the tangled hair and the hollows beneath her cheekbones. Catherine's eyes looking back at me from an 11-year-old face. The girl who once sat on my kitchen counter, asking why the compass needle always pointed north. Grandpa. One word. A question and a prayer, and a breath she had been holding for 3.5 years. My knees hit the floor. I opened my arms. She uncurled slowly, set the book on the bed beside her, stood on legs that trembled the way a foal stands for the first time. One step. Another. Small. Uncertain. The way a bird tests the air before trusting it with its full weight. Then she was against my chest. Arms around my neck. Face buried in my shoulder. And she weighed nothing. I could feel every rib through the fabric of her shirt. Every vertebra beneath my hands. But her heartbeat was fast and strong and real, hammering against my chest as if it was trying to break through and reach the world it had been locked away from. You came. Shaking. Broken in places an 11-year-old voice should never break. You said tomorrow. And you came. Shaw stepped back into the hallway. giving us this moment the way you give someone space to breathe after they surface from deep water. Grace pulled back. Her hand touched my face. Touched the tears. You are crying, Grandpa. Is it because you are happy or sad? Both, sweetheart, both. She pressed her forehead against mine, the way Catherine used to. Bone against bone. The closest two people can be without words. I watched the lighthouse every night, she whispered. When the light came around, I counted. 1, 2, 3, 4. Then dark. Then light again. It helped me sleep. It meant everything was still working. She pulled back and looked at me with those ancient eyes. Is the light still there, Grandpa? It is still there, Grace. It has never stopped. 8:15. Grace sat in the back of an ambulance parked in my driveway. A paramedic wrapped a blood pressure cuff around her thin arm, while she held my hand with her free one. She had not let go since I carried her down. Her grip was small but fierce, the grip of someone who learned that if you release what you love, it might vanish behind a steel door and never return. Morning sun fell across her face. She closed her eyes and turned toward it, the way a plant turns toward a window. Slowly, instinctively, as if her body remembered what her mind had been told to forget. That warmth exists. That light can touch your skin and stay. I need to call your daddy. He needs to know you are safe. She opened her eyes. They were enormous in her thin face. Is Daddy going to come? Yes, sweetheart. Right now. I stepped 3 feet from the ambulance. Close enough that Grace could see me. I dialed Robert. He answered on the first ring. He had been waiting since Monday. Dad. Tight. Controlled. What is happening? Robert. Grace is here. Alive. Safe. She never went to Providence. She has been in the house. 3rd floor. Catherine's library. 3.5 years. Silence. 3 seconds. 5. What? The word cracked in half. What do you mean in the house? Allison kept her locked upstairs. Police are here. Grace is with paramedics. Thin and scared but alive. She is asking for you. A sound I had never heard from my son. Between a gasp and a moan. The sound a man makes when the floor disappears beneath everything he trusted. Voices in the background. Something clattering. Dad. Ragged now. I am coming. Addison Gilbert Hospital. Meet us there. 3.5 years. She was there. I talked to her every week. And she was right there. Yes. Oh God. His breathing broke apart. Tell her Daddy is coming. I walked back. Daddy is on his way, sweetheart. She nodded. Does he know I am here? He knows now. Nobody knew before, except your mama. She was quiet. Then, I could hear him sometimes. Downstairs on the phone with Mama. I wanted to yell, but Mama said noise carries the sickness. She said it would come through the floor and find him. She said silence kept everyone safe. There is no sickness, Grace. There never was. I know. You told me last night. I believe you, Grandpa. The ambulance took us to Addison Gilbert. 14 minutes. Grace held my hand the entire ride. Heart rate elevated. Blood pressure low. Weight far below normal for her age. The paramedic wrote numbers and exchanged a look with his partner that said more than words could. They admitted her to a 2nd-floor room. A window faced east. Sunlight poured through in a wide band, moving across the floor. Grace stared at it the way someone stares at something they have dreamed too many times to trust. She reached out, pressed her palm flat against the glass. It is warm, she whispered. Real warm. Not lamp warm. Sun warm. A nurse brought juice and crackers. Grace ate slowly, breaking each cracker into pieces before placing them in her mouth. The way someone eats who learned that food arrives on a schedule, and if you eat too fast, there will be nothing left. I sat beside her and held her hand. 1 hour and 52 minutes later, the door opened. Robert stood there in his hospital scrubs. No coat, no bag. Badge still clipped to his chest. He had driven from Boston without stopping, without changing, without telling anyone where he was going. His eyes found Grace. Everything in him collapsed. She was sitting up, juice box in one hand, my hand in the other. She looked at this man shaking in the doorway. Her father. 3.5 years since she last saw him in person. She had heard his voice through the floor every week without being able to reach him. Daddy. Robert crossed the room in 3 strides. Knees hit the floor beside her bed. He pulled her against his chest. The sound that came out of him was beyond crying, something that had been building without him knowing. Grief for a loss he never knew existed. Grace wrapped her arms around his neck. They stayed that way a long time. Robert's shoulders heaving, Grace's face against his scrubs, heart monitor beeping, sunlight moving. Then Grace pulled back, looked at his face. Wet, red, broken. Daddy, why did you not come get me? Simple, honest, no accusation. Just a child who heard her father's voice through the floor every week, wondering why he never climbed the stairs. He opened his mouth, closed it. What could he say? Because I believed your mother. Because I trusted a screen. Because I planned to visit at Christmas and thought that was soon enough. I am here now, baby. I am here now. And I am never leaving again. Grace rested her head on his shoulder, closed her eyes, safe for the first time in 3.5 years. Held by her father and grandfather in the same room. No screen between them. Present and real and breathing the same air. I watched my son hold his daughter and saw something break that would take years to rebuild. Not his love. That was intact. But his trust. His belief that the people closest to you tell the truth. That question would live inside him like a splinter beneath the skin. Not because the answer was complicated. Because it was simple. He did not come because he believed. Because believing was easier than questioning. Because a screen showed him what he wanted to see, and he never looked behind it. That evening, Robert fell asleep in the chair beside Grace's bed, his hand still holding hers. A nurse entered quietly, touched my elbow, gestured toward the hallway. Mr. Calloway. Her voice was low. We received preliminary blood results. She paused the way. Medical professionals pause when the next sentence changes everything. We found traces of diphenhydramine in her system, the active ingredient in Benadryl. Levels suggest regular administration over an extended period. Someone has been medicating this child to induce sleep. I leaned against the wall. Through the door, Grace slept, chest rising and falling, in a rhythm that was finally her own. Not managed, not medicated, just a child breathing freely for the first time in 3.5 years. 4 days after we opened the door, Monday afternoon, I sat in a conference room at the Gloucester Police Department on Main Street. Detective Shaw across the table. A thick folder between us. Coffee neither of us had touched. Shaw looked tired. The kind of tired that comes from spending 4 days tracing the architecture of someone else's cruelty and finding that it goes deeper than you expected at every turn. She opened the folder and spread documents across the table the way a navigator spreads charts before plotting a course through dangerous water. Mr. Calloway, I want to walk you through what we have found. Some will confirm what you already know. Some will be new. None of it will be easy. I nodded. She pulled out the first document. A printout of a Craigslist posting archived by the digital forensics team. The room was built by a contractor named Jason Pelletier out of Nashua, New Hampshire. Allison found him through Craigslist in February of 2021. 1 month before Grace supposedly left for Providence, she paid him $40,000 in cash. No contract, no permits, no paper trail except this posting and 4 text messages recovered from his phone. She slid a screenshot across the table. Allison's message read, "Needs soundproofing. Child has severe sensory processing disorder. Doctor recommended isolation room for therapeutic recovery. Complete quiet required. Must be finished by March 1st. Pelletier's reply. Can do. Cash only. When is the homeowner away? Allison. He visits his son in Boston the second week of March. You will have 5 days. I stared at the text. 5 days. I had visited Robert that week. Came back to find Allison had rearranged the third-floor landing. Fresh paint smell. She said she had been freshening things up after the water damage repair. I thanked her for being thoughtful. Shaw continued. Pelletier installed the steel door, electronic keypad, soundproofing foam on walls and ceiling, a basic plumbing connection for a small sink, and a ventilation system to keep the air breathable. He also sealed the east window from the inside with plywood and acoustic board, then plastered and painted over it to match the surrounding wall. He completed the work in 4 days. The window. The one Grace pressed her face against when Miguel saw her. It had been sealed, and she had somehow found a gap, or the seal had failed over time the way all things fail when they are built in haste by hands that do not care about what they are containing. Has Pelletier been charged? He is cooperating fully. Claims he believed the therapeutic explanation. His texts suggest discomfort, but he took the money. We are charging him as accessory. Shaw pulled out a second set of documents. Subscription records from an application called Face Swap Pro. Allison created an account on March 8, 2021. 3 days after Grace was locked in, she uploaded 52 video clips of Grace. Birthday parties, family dinners, playground footage, all recorded before March 2021. The application used these clips to generate new video resembling Grace speaking, moving, smiling, aging. The technology is sophisticated. It aged the face over time to simulate natural growth. It could respond to prompts, new hairstyles, different clothing. It generated appropriate backgrounds from reference images. In this case, stock photos of school environments. I thought of those Sunday calls. The smile that looked right but blinked wrong. The bookshelf with blurred spines. 3.5 years of synthetic video. $19.99 per month. Used to deceive you and your son into believing Grace was alive and thriving in Providence while she was sealed in a room directly above your kitchen. Shaw set that aside and pulled out the financial records. This confirms what Dorothy Yates reported. The education trust totaled $2.1 million. Since Allison gained sole access, $1.6 million withdrawn. Our forensic accountant traced funds to 3 crypto margin trading platforms and 1 poker site. She listed them: Coinbase Pro, Kraken, a leveraged trading site in the Cayman Islands, and a poker platform in Curacao. Total losses over 14 months, $1.1 million. Additional funds used to pay Pelletier. Maintain the deepfake subscription. Purchase supplies for Grace. And service secondary debts from the trading losses. The mortgage forgery on your property added another $280,000. She paused. Let the numbers settle the way sediment settles after a storm churns the harbor floor. There is more. She also attempted to purchase a life insurance policy on Grace 6 months ago. Named herself as sole beneficiary. The application was flagged and denied because she could not provide a current pediatrician's examination or signature. My stomach turned. Life insurance. On a child she was starving behind a locked door. Shaw opened the next section. The blood work from Addison Gilbert confirmed what the preliminary panel suggested. Regular administration of diphenhydramine, liquid Benadryl. Purchased over the counter. No prescription needed. She gave it to Grace every evening. The levels in Grace's system suggest consistent dosing over at least 12 months. Enough to induce drowsiness and suppress activity. Not enough to cause acute harm, but sustained use at these levels in a growing child can affect cognitive development, sleep architecture, and neurological function. She was drugging her to keep her quiet, I said. Yes. Likely to reduce the risk of Grace making noise that could be heard from below. particularly during the hours when you were home and awake. Every morning I stood in that kitchen making coffee 12 feet below a child who had been sedated the night before to ensure I would not hear her. The thought sat inside my chest like a stone dropped into deep water. Sinking. Still sinking. Shaw closed that section and opened the last folder. A preliminary report from Dr. Nina Reeves, the child psychologist assigned to Grace's case. She completed her initial assessment yesterday. Shaw read from the page. Grace presents with significant social isolation, consistent with prolonged confinement. Language development is approximately 14 months behind age-appropriate conversational norms. However, she looked up at me. Reading comprehension tests at 9th grade level. I did not move. She taught herself to read. Mr. Calloway. From books that were already in the room when it was sealed. Your wife's books. Poetry. Novels. History. A Spanish-English dictionary. Children's literature. 400 volumes that Catherine Calloway placed on those shelves over 30 years. Catherine's library. The room Allison turned into a prison still held the books Catherine carried up those stairs, one by one, and Grace had opened them. Everyone had taught herself to read from the words my wife left behind, the way a sailor teaches himself to navigate from the stars. Not because anyone showed him how, because the stars were there, and he refused to stop looking up. Shaw closed the folder. In 18 years of this work, I have seen cruelty in many forms. But this level of planning, this precision, she shook her head. She did not act in a moment of crisis. She built this the way an architect designs a building, layer by layer. Every contingency addressed. Every witness neutralized. Architecture, I said. Remembering Dorothy, using the same word. Yes, built to imprison a child and conceal a gambling addiction from everyone who could have stopped it. Designed to function indefinitely. If your gardener had not seen that face, if Grace had not found that gap in the sealed window, this could have continued for years. But she did find the gap. And Miguel saw her. And here we are. Here we are. Shaw repeated. And we have enough to put her away for a very long time. Later that same afternoon, Shaw brought me to a second room down the hallway. Smaller. A long table covered with clear plastic evidence bags. Each bag held paper. Drawings. Hundreds of them organized in rows like tiles, waiting to be laid. Even through the plastic, the colors were vivid. Crayon, marker, colored pencil. Some on white printer paper. Some on the backs of envelopes. Some on pages carefully torn from Catherine's art books, with the printed side used for study and the blank reverse used for creation. Dr. Reeves wanted to walk you through these personally, Shaw said. She said it was important you see them in context. Dr. Nina Reeves arrived 5 minutes later. 39. Dark hair. Steady eyes that held something careful behind their professional composure. She carried a tablet and a thin folder. Mr. Calloway. Thank you for coming. I know this has been an overwhelming week. Shaw said you wanted me to see these. Yes. She moved to the head of the table. What you are looking at is approximately 312 drawings created by Grace over roughly 3.5 years. They were removed from the walls during evidence processing. I have been cataloging them as part of my psychological assessment. She gestured to the first row. These are the earliest works, created when Grace was approximately 8. Shortly after, confinement began. Motor control is age-appropriate. Simple shapes. Basic figures. The emotional content is primarily confusion and fear. I looked. Stick figures. A small shape behind a large rectangle. Dark colors. Heavy crayon pressure that tore through the paper in places. The marks of a frightened child pressing too hard because pressing hard was the only control she had. Reeves moved to the second row. By the end of the first year, her work changes dramatically. Figures become detailed. Proportions improve. She is developing artistic skill at an accelerated rate because drawing is her primary activity. her only form of expression. I saw it. The stick figures had become recognizable people. A tall man with white hair holding something round in his hand. A window showing blue beyond it. A shape that might have been a book. And beside it, a smaller figure holding something brown against its chest. The bear. Catherine's bear. These subjects repeat throughout the entire collection. Reeves tapped her tablet. 58 drawings of a male figure in what appears to be a kitchen. 44 of an ocean viewed from above. 39 of a bear figure, often positioned as if reading or speaking. And 237 drawings that contain one specific element. She paused. A lighthouse. Present in over 76% of all drawings created during 3.5 years of captivity. I gripped the edge of the table. Reeves lifted a bag from the middle section. This one was created approximately 18 months into confinement, based on paper type and developmental markers. Through the plastic, I could see it clearly. A lighthouse at the center of the page. Tall, white, drawn with careful lines that showed real understanding of proportion and perspective for a 9-year-old. The beam swept across the paper in thick golden rays. And standing at the base of the lighthouse, a figure. Tall, white hair. One hand extended toward the viewer, the other holding a round shape. A coffee cup. At the bottom, in careful letters that slanted slightly right the way a left-handed child writes, were 5 words. The light always comes back. I could not speak. I reached for the bag. Reeves nodded. I held it in both hands. 5 words written by a child, locked in a room for 1.5 years. A child who could hear me making coffee through the floor every morning. Who could see the lighthouse beam sweep past her window every night. Who drew me standing beside that light because in her mind the two were the same thing. The keeper and the beam. The grandfather and the promise that morning always follows darkness. Mr. Calloway. Reeves spoke gently. In my professional opinion, these drawings served as Grace's primary psychological survival mechanism. Drawing you kept you present in her mind. Drawing the lighthouse kept hope alive. She did not simply document her captivity. She drew her way out of it. Repeatedly. Obsessively. Every day she recreated the moment of rescue in her imagination. And I believe that act of creation preserved her mental health when everything else was designed to destroy it. She picked up another bag. Same lighthouse. Same golden beam. But this time the figure at the base was kneeling. Arms open, and running toward it, a smaller figure. Long hair, streaming behind. Arms reaching forward. This is from approximately 6 months ago. The most recent before rescue. Notice the confidence of the lines. The detail in the lighthouse structure. By this point, Grace was not hoping for rescue. She was expecting it. She had drawn it so many times it had become real in her mind. A certainty, rather than a wish. I set the first drawing down and picked up this one. The small figure running. Hair flying. Arms reaching. Running toward open arms and golden light. She drew this 6 months ago, I said. My voice was barely there. Before she had any reason to believe I would come, Reeves nodded. Faith, Mr. Calloway. The faith of a child who loves her grandfather and believes that love is stronger than locked doors. She drew you into existence every single day, and ultimately she was right. I looked down the length of the table. 312 drawings. 3.5 years of a child's inner world spread across plastic bags, and in over 200 of them, a lighthouse. Always lit, always sweeping, always reaching across the dark towards something beyond the edge of the paper. Reeves spoke once more. One detail I want you to notice. In the drawings of the male figure, from the very first to the very last, he is always facing the viewer. Always reaching out. Never turned away. Never absent. Even in the darkest drawings where the walls are black and the space feels small, the figure of you is present and reaching. She met my eyes. She never lost her image of you as someone who would come. Not once. Then Reeves turned to the final bag at the end of the table. separated from the others by a small gap. This was created 2 days before rescue. Based on the paper, it was drawn on the back of a page torn from Catherine's copy of collected Frost poems. Through the plastic I saw it. Not a room, not walls, not a door. A girl standing outside. Arms spread wide. Face tilted up toward a sky that filled the entire page. And in that sky, a lighthouse. Not small, not distant. Enormous, filling the upper half of the paper. Its beam pouring down like rain made of gold, covering the girl, covering the ground, covering everything. At the bottom, in letters larger and steadier than any of the earlier drawings, one word: tomorrow. 2 days before I knelt on that landing and whispered through steel. 2 days before the warrant. 2 days before the door opened. My granddaughter drew tomorrow, as if she already knew it was coming, as if 312 lighthouses had finally called it home, 2 weeks after the door opened. Tuesday afternoon. I sat in a waiting room at Addison Gilbert, with a paper cup of coffee that tasted like nothing, and a magazine I had been staring at without reading. Down the hallway behind a door, painted with cartoon starfish, my granddaughter was speaking to Dr. Reeves for the 4th time. The first 3 sessions had been mostly silence. Reeves told me that was normal. Children who experienced prolonged isolation needed time to rediscover their own voice. Speaking after years of enforced quiet felt dangerous to them. Like stepping onto ice that might crack. Like making a sound that might carry through a wall and bring something terrible with it. But today was different. Reeves came out at 3:40. Her expression was careful, composed. But something lived behind her eyes that had not been there before. Grace talked today. More than all previous sessions combined. I would like to share what she said. She gave permission. She wants you to know. She said Grandpa should hear this. I set the coffee down. Reeves opened her notebook. I am going to paraphrase, Mr. Calloway. Not exact quotes in every case, but the substance is preserved. She began. Grace told me that on the first day, March 5, 2021, Allison brought her upstairs and told her they were playing a game. A hiding game. Grace had to stay very quiet because something dangerous was outside. Allison called it the sickness. I closed my eyes. Over the following days, Allison elaborated. She told Grace a terrible disease had come from the ocean. That the air outside was poisoned. That only inside this room was it safe to breathe. She told Grace that Daddy was sick in Boston and could not visit. That Grandpa was old and the sickness would kill him if Grace made any noise that let it in. Reeves paused. Checking her notes, Grace said, Mama told me the sickness lived in sound. That if I screamed or yelled it would hear me and come through the walls. So I had to be quiet like a lighthouse. She said, lighthouses do not make noise. They only make light. And I had to be like that. Only light. No sound. I thought of that first Wednesday. Miguel hearing faint crying. So quiet, you would miss it if the television was on. 3.5 years of trained silence. 3.5 years of a child believing her own voice was a weapon that could kill the people she loved. Grace believed this completely for the first year. Reeves continued. She was 8. The concept of a pandemic was not unfamiliar. She remembered COVID restrictions at 5 and 6. Allison used that memory as foundation. Told Grace this was worse. That this time people could not even leave their rooms. That the ocean itself was carrying it into the air. She paused. In the second year, Grace began to doubt. She could hear normal sounds through the floor. Your coffee machine. The radio. Conversations. If the sickness was in the air, why was Grandpa still walking around? Why was Allison going outside freely? She asked Allison about this. What did Allison tell her? That adults had received a special medicine. A vaccine that protected them. But the medicine was dangerous for children. It would damage Grace's brain. So Grace had to wait until scientists made a version safe for kids. I opened my eyes. Stared at the wall across from me. Cartoon starfish and smiling jellyfish. A mural designed to make children feel safe. My granddaughter had spent 3.5 years being told the ocean she loved was poison. Reeves continued. Grace said she could hear you every morning. She described it very specifically. The cabinet opening, the coffee bag, water filling the pot, the chair scraping the floor when you sit down. She said this was her favorite part of the day because she knew you were there. Close. Alive. Real. Reeves looked at me. She pressed her ear against the floor every morning and listened to you make coffee. She said it was her clock. It meant the day was starting. It meant the world was still turning. It meant Grandpa was okay. My throat closed. Every morning, for 3.5 years, I stood in that kitchen grinding beans and pouring water, while directly above me a child had her ear pressed against the floorboards, listening to me live my life, drawing comfort from the sound of a coffee machine because it was the only proof she had that I existed. Reeves gave me a moment, then continued. I asked Grace about the bear, the one she was holding when you found her. She calls it Grandma Cat. She read from her notes. Grace said, Grandma Cat lives in the bear. She reads to me at night when I cannot sleep. I hold her, and she talks to me. She tells me stories about whales and lighthouses and the kitchen and Grandpa. I ask her questions, and she answers. She always answers. She never says, I do not know. She says, let us find out. Tears came. I did not stop them. Catherine's bear. The one she gave Grace on her 5th birthday. The last gift my wife ever gave our granddaughter. For 3.5 years, Grace held it and heard Catherine's voice inside it, turned it into a vessel for everything she remembered about safety and love and the world before the door closed. She kept Catherine alive, I whispered. Yes, Reeves said softly. In a very real psychological sense, that bear served as a transitional object representing safety, love, and connection. It was her anchor. Without it, her isolation would have been complete. She closed the notebook, then reopened it to one final page. At the end of our session today, Grace asked me a question. She said, Is the sickness gone now? Can I go outside forever? I told her the truth. I told her there was never any sickness, that the world outside had always been safe, that she could have walked out at any time if the door had not been locked. Reeves met my eyes. She was quiet for a very long time. Then she asked one question. 4 words. So, Mama lied. The waiting room was silent. Fluorescent lights humming. What did you tell her? I told her yes. That her mother lied. That there was no sickness. That air was safe. That sound could not hurt anyone. That she was allowed to speak and yell and sing as loud as she wanted for the rest of her life. How did she respond? Reeves looked at me. The professional composure slipped for a moment. Something raw behind it. She opened her mouth and screamed. Not fear. Release. Pure sound. As loud as she could manage. 12 seconds. Then she stopped, smiled, and said, I have been saving that for a very long time. I sat back, closed my eyes. My granddaughter had screamed. After 3.5 years of believing her voice was a weapon, she opened her mouth and filled the room with sound, and smiled afterward. That smile was worth everything. Every sleepless night, every page in the logbook, every minute on that frozen landing. That smile said the fog had lifted. The signal was clear, and the light had finally reached her. 5 months after the door opened. March. The Essex County Courthouse stood gray and solid, under a sky that could not decide between rain and clearing. I wore the navy suit Catherine picked out for our 35th anniversary. She said it made me look like a man the sea would respect. I had not worn it since her funeral. It smelled faintly of cedar from the closet, and something else I could not name. Something that might have been her. Robert sat to my left in a charcoal blazer. His hands folded so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He had lost weight. 5 months of guilt will do that to a man. 5 months of replaying every Sunday call and realizing the face on the screen was software, and the voice was a recording, and the daughter he thought was thriving in Providence was breathing through sedated sleep 12 feet above his father's kitchen. Grace was not present. Dr. Reeves testified in a pretrial hearing that exposing an 11-year-old to the woman who imprisoned her would cause irreparable psychological harm. The judge agreed. Grace stayed home with Dorothy, drawing at the kitchen table, unaware that today the world would decide what her mother deserved. The courtroom held maybe 60 people. Reporters filled the first 2 rows on the left. Neighbors, friends, and strangers who followed the story online filled the rest. Tom Corrigan sat in the 4th row, arms crossed, jaw set, the look of a man watching something burn that he wished he had put out sooner. Miguel sat near the back in a pressed white shirt, turning a rosary between his fingers. Dorothy sat beside me in the row behind the prosecution table, straight-backed, steady, the way Catherine would have sat. Allison entered from a side door in an orange jumpsuit, wrists cuffed. She had lost weight. Her hair hung flat. She did not look at me, did not look at Robert, looked straight ahead at the judge's bench, the way a person looks at something when they have decided this is happening to someone else. Prosecutor Angela Torres opened with a single sentence. For 1,277 days, Allison Calloway kept an 8-year-old child locked in a 10 by 12-foot room and told her the ocean would kill her if she spoke. The courtroom went silent. Someone behind me inhaled sharply. Then, nothing. Torres built her case the way a shipwright builds a hull, one plank at a time, fitted with precision. No gaps, no guesswork. Watertight. She introduced the contractor first. Jason Pelletier confirmed he was paid $40,000 in cash over 4 days to install soundproofing, a steel door, electronic keypad, ventilation, and a small sink. He said Allison told him it was a therapeutic recovery room for a child with severe sensory issues. He said he believed her until he saw the news 5 months later and pulled his truck to the side of the highway because he could not see through what was happening to his eyes. Next, the digital evidence. A forensic analyst named Dr. Howard Chen displayed 52 source videos and demonstrated how FaceSwap Pro generated synthetic footage of Grace aging, speaking, moving in fabricated school environments. He showed the jury 3 side-by-side comparisons. The real Grace at 8 years old, and the generated Grace at 9, 10, 11. He pointed to the blink pattern, the static background, the render artifacts in the bookshelf spines. 3.5 years of deepfake video delivered every Sunday at 6 in the evening. 182 lies on schedule. Dorothy testified about the money. She displayed bank records showing $1.6 million withdrawn from Catherine's education trust over 14 months. $1.1 million lost across crypto trading platforms and a poker site. $280,000 taken through the forged mortgage. Dorothy's voice did not waver. She presented numbers the way a navigator presents coordinates. Cold, clear, undeniable. Every figure placed exactly where it needed to be to show the jury the shape of what had been destroyed. Detective Shaw took the stand for 70 minutes. She walked the jury through the full timeline, from Miguel's call to the moment forensics cracked the keypad. She played 3 recordings. The first was Allison telling a locksmith the 3rd-floor room contained sensitive documents that needed climate-controlled security. The second was a voicemail Allison left for Robert 3 weeks before rescue, cheerfully describing Grace's supposed winter recital at Whitfield Academy. The third was the audio from my phone. 3 knocks. Then Grace's voice through steel. "Grandpa, is the outside safe now?" Several jurors looked down. A woman in seat number 5 pressed a hand over her mouth. The man in seat 11 removed his glasses and did not put them back on for the rest of the session. The defense attorney, a tall man named William Pratt, argued diminished capacity. He claimed Allison suffered from a gambling addiction that spiraled into compulsive deception and paranoid decision-making. He called a psychiatrist who spoke about impulse control disorder and dissociative episodes and cognitive distortion under financial stress. The psychiatrist used clinical language for 40 minutes and never once said Grace's name. He spoke only of the defendant's mental state as though the child locked upstairs for 3.5 years was a footnote in someone else's medical chart. Torres delivered her closing in 9 minutes. She stood 6 feet from the jury and spoke without notes. Grace Calloway drew 312 pictures in that room. 237 of them contain a lighthouse. She could see the beam from 10-Pound Island through a gap in a sealed window every night. She counted the flashes to fall asleep. She drew her grandfather standing beside that lighthouse because in her mind he was the keeper and the light was the promise that morning always comes. Torres paused, looked at each juror in turn. She drew 312 prayers on paper, and she should never have had to draw a single one. She should never have had to count lighthouse flashes to know the world still existed. She should never have had to press her ear to a floor to hear her grandfather make coffee because it was the only proof she had that someone she loved was still alive. Torres turned toward Allison. Allison did not move. Allison Calloway did not lose control. She hired a contractor. She built a door. She purchased software. She forged documents. She maintained a schedule of feeding and sedation and digital deception for 1,277 days without a single lapse. That is not illness. That is architecture. And the child she trapped inside that architecture drew her way out one lighthouse at a time. The courtroom was still. Torres returned to the prosecution table. The jury retired to deliberate at 4:17 in the afternoon. The door closed behind them. The courtroom exhaled. Robert stared at the table. I stared at the empty witness stand where Shaw's recording had played through speakers that carried my granddaughter's voice into a room full of strangers who now understood what that voice had cost her to use. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and 15 minutes. I sat in the hallway on a wooden bench that had been worn smooth by decades of people, waiting for answers they were not sure they wanted to hear. Robert sat beside me. Neither of us spoke. We had run out of words somewhere around the second hour and settled into a silence that was not uncomfortable. It was the silence of two men who understood that whatever came through that courtroom door in the next minutes would not undo what had been done. It would only determine what happened next. At 8:32, the bailiff opened the door and said the jury had reached a verdict. We filed back in. The courtroom filled quickly. Reporters reclaimed their rows. Tom and Dorothy and Miguel found their seats. The fluorescent lights hummed the way they had all day, indifferent to what was about to be spoken beneath them. Allison was brought in through the side door. Same jumpsuit. Same flat expression. She sat beside Pratt and folded her hands on the table and looked straight ahead, as if the wall behind the judge contained something only she could see. The jury foreman stood. A man in his 50s. Gray at the temples. Hands steady. The judge spoke. On the count of unlawful imprisonment of a minor, how does the jury find? Guilty. The word landed in the room like a stone dropped into still water. Ripples moved outward through the gallery. A sharp breath from the reporter's row. Dorothy's hand found mine on the bench between us and squeezed once. On the count of fraud? Guilty. On the count of forgery? Guilty. On the count of embezzlement? Guilty. On the count of child endangerment? Guilty. On the count of identity theft? Guilty. On the count of exploitation of a vulnerable person? Guilty. On the count of unauthorized administration of a controlled substance to a minor? Guilty. 8 counts. 8 times the word fell. Each one a plank nailed into place. A structure being built in real time. Not the kind Allison had built. Not architecture designed to hide and deceive. This was architecture designed to hold. To stand. To keep what needed keeping and release what needed releasing. Allison showed no visible reaction. Not on the first count. Not on the 8th. She sat perfectly still, the way she had sat perfectly still across from me at the kitchen table for years. Smiling when smiling was required. composed when composure was expected. Even now, even here. The mask held. Judge Eleanor Ward addressed the courtroom. She was 63. Silver hair cut short. A voice that carried the weight of someone who had spent decades listening to the worst things people do to each other and had not yet lost the ability to be affected by them. She looked at Allison. Miss Calloway, this court has heard testimony over 3 days that describes a level of calculated cruelty I have rarely encountered in 26 years on this bench. You told a child the ocean would kill her. You sealed a window that looked out at the sea she loved and told her the air beyond it was poison. You stole her grandmother's library and turned it into a cell. You drugged her to ensure her silence. You fabricated her existence with software and stock photographs while spending the money her grandmother saved over 20 years on gambling platforms that gave you nothing in return except the need to gamble more. The judge paused. You turned your daughter into a ghost, a digital puppet whose face appeared on screens every Sunday, while the real child sat in darkness 12 feet above a man who loved her and would have torn that door from its hinges with his bare hands if he had known she was behind. She removed her glasses and set them on the bench. This court sentences you to 28 years in the Massachusetts Department of Correction. You will not be eligible for parole for 18 years. This court sees no mercy in your history and offers none in return. Allison did not move. She was led through the side door by 2 officers. The door closed behind her with a sound that was quiet and final, like the last page of a book being turned. Robert exhaled beside me, a long, slow breath that carried 5 months of held air. I put my hand on his shoulder. He put his hand on mine. Neither of us spoke. Outside the courthouse, the March air smelled like salt and cold stone. The sky had finally decided. Clearing. Pale blue breaking through gray the way it does on the coast when the weather gives up pretending and shows you what has been behind the clouds all along. Tom shook my hand on the courthouse steps. No words. Just his hand around mine, firm. The grip of a man who understood that some things do not need to be spoken because the handshake says everything. Miguel hugged me. His arms were strong and his eyes were wet, and he whispered something in Spanish I did not catch but understood anyway. Dorothy took both my hands in hers and said quietly, "Catherine is proud, Edmund. She is so proud." I nodded because I could not speak. Because speaking would have broken something I needed to keep intact for the drive home. That night I sat at the kitchen table at 11:14. Coffee that had gone cold 2 hours earlier. Above me the ceiling was silent. No heartbeat, no breathing, no tiny movements. Grace was asleep in Robert's apartment across town, in a room with 3 windows that opened whenever she wanted. The silence above my kitchen was finally, mercifully empty. I looked up at the ceiling. Flat, white, still. 1,000 mornings I had sat beneath it, while my granddaughter breathed 12 feet above me. 1,000 mornings I heard nothing, because I was not listening, or because I was listening but did not know what to listen for. That is the part that still visits me. Not the anger, not the courtroom, not Allison's blank face. What visits me is how close the truth was, how it lived directly above me every single day, and how I walked beneath it and poured my coffee and read my newspaper and never once looked up. After 3.5 years of holding my breath, every time I glanced at that ceiling, the silence sounded like music. My phone buzzed on the table. Not a call. A text message. From Robert's number, but the words were not Robert's. "Good night, Grandpa. I can hear the ocean from my window." It sounds like Grandma reading, her first text. Typed on Robert's iPad, with 11-year-old fingers that had spent 3.5 years holding crayons and a stuffed bear and the pages of Catherine's books. Fingers that had pressed against glass and knocked 3 times on steel and drawn 312 lighthouses on paper because that was the only way she knew to send a signal through the dark. I set the phone down on the table beside my cold coffee. Read the message again. And again. The ocean sounds like Grandma reading. Catherine would have wept at that. She would have pressed the phone against her heart and closed her eyes and said, That is the most beautiful sentence anyone has ever written. She would have been right. 2 years passed the way the tide smooths a stone. Not in any single dramatic moment. Not with the force of a storm. But slowly, quietly, with a patience I had to learn from my own granddaughter. Grace turned 13 in March. Robert bought a house 3 blocks from mine on Atlantic Road. A single-story craftsman, with a wide porch and a yard that sloped gently toward the rocks where the ocean met the shore. The backyard had a clear sightline to 10-Pound Island Lighthouse. Robert told me later that Grace asked for 2 things when they went house hunting: a view of the light and windows that open. Every room in that house has windows that open. Robert made certain of it. The kitchen has 3. The living room has 4. The bathroom has a small frosted one that catches morning sun and throws it across the tile in scattered shapes. Grace calls ocean diamonds, but Grace's bedroom has 5. 5 windows in a single room, each one facing a different direction, as though the house understood that a child who lived without sky for 3.5 years would need every possible angle of it. Grace calls it the harbor room. She named it herself on moving day, when she stood in the center of the empty space and turned in a slow circle looking at each window one by one and said, "This room feels like standing on the water." Robert let her choose the paint. She picked a shade called Harbor Blue, a deep, calm color that changes with the light the way the actual harbor does. Pale in the morning, rich in the afternoon, almost black at night, when the only color comes from the lighthouse beam sweeping past every 4 seconds. She painted one wall herself with a roller too big for her hands. The streaks are still visible if you look closely. Robert never repainted them. He told me those streaks are proof that Grace chose something and made it real with her own hands. I understood exactly what he meant. A keeper knows the difference between a wall someone built for you and a wall you built yourself. One shelters you. The other is yours. The room holds a twin bed with a white comforter covered in small embroidered anchors. A bookshelf Robert and I built together one Saturday afternoon, using red oak, the same wood Catherine and I used for the shelves in our living room 30 years ago. A desk sits by the largest window where Grace does homework and draws. She still draws every day. Dr. Reeves says it is no longer survival. It has become a language. Grace speaks in color and line the way some children speak in music or numbers. On the wall above her desk hang 3 framed pictures. The first is a photograph of Catherine, holding infant Grace in the hospital. Both of them glowing under fluorescent light. Catherine's smile so wide it barely fits the frame. The second is one of Grace's drawings from the room. The one where the grandfather stands at the base of the lighthouse with a coffee cup and the words, "The light always comes back." She asked to keep it. Reeves agreed it was healthy. The third is a new drawing Grace made 6 months after rescue. It shows the same lighthouse, the same beam, but this time Grace is on the outside looking back. The room behind her is empty. The door is open, but she is walking away from it. Reeves called it the most significant piece of art she had seen in 20 years of practice. Grace attends Gloucester Middle School, a real school with real teachers who know her name and real children who pass her in real hallways. She started in 6th grade, 2 years behind her age group. Within 8 months, she tested into 7th and then 8th. Her reading level is 11th grade. Her math is 9th. Reeves attributes this to the 3.5 years Grace spent teaching herself from Catherine's books. 400 volumes that my wife carried up those stairs, one by one over 3 years. Charlotte's Web, The Secret Garden, A Wrinkle in Time, the collected poems of Robert Frost, an encyclopedia set from 1986. Grace read them all, some twice. The encyclopedia she read, cover to cover. She told me volume N was missing. I checked. She was right. It had been missing since 1993. My granddaughter noticed from memory. She has friends now. 2 girls named Mia and Jordan, who live on the same street and ride bikes with her after school along the harbor walk. They do not know the full story. They know Grace lived somewhere else for a while and came back. That is enough for 13-year-olds. They care more about whether Grace can ride no hands than where she was 3 years ago. She cannot ride no hands yet. She is working on it. I have watched her try 11 times from my porch. Each attempt a little longer before the handlebars wobble and her fingers grab on again. Robert works from home now. He left the Boston hospital and took a position at a community clinic in Gloucester. Teaching, supervising residents, the kind of work that lets him walk through his own front door by 5:30 every evening. He makes Grace breakfast at 7:15. Pancakes on Mondays, eggs on Tuesdays through Thursdays, cereal on Fridays. Because Grace says Fridays should be easy. Saturdays, they cook together. Sundays, they come to my house. Every Sunday morning, Grace walks through my front door without knocking, goes straight to the kitchen, pours herself a glass of orange juice, sits at the table, and looks up at the ceiling. She does this every single time. 3 seconds. Her eyes move across the plaster the way mine used to move across the lighthouse lens at the start of a watch. Checking, reading, confirming. Then she looks at me and smiles. "Good morning, Grandpa." And we begin our day. I asked her once why she looks up. She was peeling an orange at the table. Sunday light coming through the kitchen window. The harbor, visible through the glass. The lighthouse standing white against the blue the way it has stood for over 100 years. "I am making sure it is quiet," she said. "It will always be quiet now," I told her. She set the orange peel on the table in a single unbroken spiral, the way Catherine used to. A small skill passed down through books and memory, and the invisible threads that connect people who love each other across distances no wall can measure. "I know," she said. "But I like to check. The way you used to check the lighthouse every morning, even when you knew it was working." I looked at my granddaughter, 13 years old, 3.5 years of darkness behind her. Orange peel in a perfect spiral. Catherine's eyes looking back at me from a face that was learning how to be young again. She was right. I checked the lighthouse every morning for 35 years. Not because I doubted it, because checking was how I honored it. How I said I am still here and so are you, and neither of us is going anywhere. Grace checks the ceiling the same way. Not fear. Confirmation. A keeper's habit. Learned not from me, but from the same place I learned it. From standing watch over something precious and refusing to look away. The spring meet at Gloucester Middle School fell on the second Saturday of May. The kind of New England morning where the sky stretches so wide and blue above the harbor, it looks like someone washed it overnight and hung it out to dry. 62 degrees by 9. Not a cloud. The smell of cut grass and salt air drifting across the field. I arrived at 7:45 with a folding chair, a thermos of black coffee, and a hat Catherine bought me in 2006 at a gift shop on Bearskin Neck. The hat said Gloucester in faded blue letters. I wore it to every one of Robert's baseball games when he was a boy. Now I wore it for Grace. Robert saved me a spot along the fence near the 400-meter start. He had set up 2 chairs and a small cooler of water bottles and orange slices. Dorothy sat beside him in a wide-brimmed sun hat, fanning herself with the program. Tom stood behind them scanning the field the way a man scans a building for structural hazards. Old habits. Miguel stood to my right, holding a small American flag he had brought for no reason other than he said, it felt like the kind of day that deserved one. Grace was somewhere behind the school warming up with her team. She joined track in January. Coach Herrera told Robert she had a natural stride. Long and fluid. She was small for 13. Still catching up to the height and weight those years had taken. But her legs moved like they had somewhere important to be. The announcer called the girls' 400-meter final at 10:18. 8 lanes. 8 runners. Grace drew lane 5. I watched her walk to the blocks in her white jersey, with the blue Gloucester crest, number 32 pinned to her chest, hair pulled back in a single ponytail. She looked small between the taller girls in lanes 4 and 6. She looked ready. I set my coffee down. Robert leaned forward. Dorothy put a hand over her heart. Tom unfolded his arms and gripped the fence. Miguel held his flag a little higher. The starter raised the pistol. Grace crouched. The gun cracked, and 8 girls launched forward. The first 100 meters were chaos. Elbows in ponytails and sneakers on synthetic track. Grace sat in 5th. Stride short and controlled. Coach Herrera had told her to stay patient through the first curve. Do not chase. Let them come to you. At 150, she moved to 4th. Her stride opened. I could see it from the fence. The difference between running and deciding to run. Arms lower, chin up, feet striking the track with a rhythm that reminded me of the lighthouse beam. Steady. Certain. 4 seconds on. 4 seconds dark. Always coming back around. At 200, she passed the girl in 3rd. At 250, she moved into 2nd. 1 runner ahead. A tall girl from Rockport in lane 3, with legs that seemed to reach the finish before her body. The gap was maybe 4 meters. At 300, I stood up. So did Robert. So did Dorothy. Tom was already standing. Miguel raised the flag above his head. The fence section erupted. Parents shouting. Children banging chain link. Coach Herrera clapping both hands above her head. Grace entered the final curve in 2nd. 3 meters behind. Her face had changed. Not pain. Not strain. The look of someone who has waited a very long time for a door to open and now sees it right in front of her. She closed the gap at 320. Pulled even at 350. The Rockport girl surged. Grace surged back. Shoulder to shoulder, for 10 meters. That lasted longer than 10 meters should. At 370, Grace leaned forward. Not with her chest, with her whole body. The way a keeper leans into the wind on the gallery walkway, trusting the structure to hold. She crossed the line at 1 minute 14 seconds. First place. By half a stride. The crowd erupted. I did not move. My hands gripped the fence and my eyes blurred, and I stood perfectly still while Robert shouted, and Dorothy spilled her water, and Tom slapped the fence post, and Miguel waved his flag in circles above his head. Grace slowed to a jog, then a walk. Then she turned and looked directly at me through the fence. 40 meters of track and grass and people between us. She smiled. Not big. Quiet. The kind that says, I know you are watching, and I wanted you to see this. She held up one finger. First place. He held up one finger back. She jogged to her team and disappeared into a circle of screaming 13-year-olds. I sat down in my chair and let the tears fall into my cold coffee. Robert put his hand on my shoulder. Catherine would have loved this, I said. She would have been standing on the chair. She would have been louder than everyone combined. She would have said, that is our girl. That is our brave, beautiful girl. I whispered it for her. Under the May sun, under a faded blue hat from bearskin neck. That is our girl. That night I sat alone in my kitchen at 11. The house quiet. The kind of quiet I used to fear. The kind that made me press my palm against the ceiling and hold my breath. But tonight, the quiet was different. Earned. Grace's first place ribbon sat on the counter beside my mug. Blue satin with gold letters. I set it against the sugar bowl where Catherine used to prop her recipe cards. It looked right there. I looked at the ceiling. Flat, white, silent. I do not tell you this story for sympathy. I do not tell it for anger or revenge. Allison is in a cell in Framingham. 28 years. That chapter closed when Judge Ward spoke her sentence and the officers led her through the side door. I felt no satisfaction. Only the quiet click of something ending. I tell you this story for what I learned sitting in this kitchen after everything was over. Trust your discomfort. The morning Miguel called. Something in my chest recognized the truth before my mind did. A tightness. The feeling a keeper gets when the fog thickens and the instruments have not caught up yet. If something feels wrong in your home, do not wait for proof. Move. Measure the people in your life. I spent 35 years reading signals. I never read the people beside me with the same care. People lie in frequencies you cannot hear unless you are listening. Measure their words against their actions. When the signals do not match, believe the signals. Children speak in ways that are easy to miss. Grace drew 312 lighthouses. She pressed her ear to the floor every morning. She knocked 3 times on a steel door at midnight. If a child in your life repeats the same drawing, the same question, the same gesture, pay attention. That is not imagination. That is testimony. Time does not wait. Every day I did not act was a day Grace spent alone. If you are waiting to act on something important, stop waiting. Today is already late. I rinsed my mug. Dried it with the blue towel Catherine hung on the oven handle in 2004. I keep it because it still smells like her if I press it close enough. God forgive me for the years I did not look up. I was right there. Every morning, 12 feet below her. And I did not know. Tomorrow I will make coffee. Grace will walk through my door. She will pour orange juice. She will glance at the ceiling for 3 seconds. She will say, "Good morning, Grandpa," and the morning will be good. If this story reached you, if something in it made you think of a door you have not opened or a signal you have not answered, I am asking you now, open it. Listen. Believe the child who keeps drawing the same picture. Do not wait for a gardener to call you on a Thursday morning. Be the one who looks up first. God bless you. God bless your family. And God bless every child who is still waiting for someone to see the light they have been sending through the dark. The Lord keeps watch even when the keeper sleeps. But the keeper must wake. The keeper must always wake.